What would you do if you saw a little girl, no more than 6, walk into a bank with nothing but a worn teddy bear and the courage to demand respect, only to be laughed at? This isn't just a story. It's a mirror held up to all of us. If you've ever witnessed or felt injustice like this, share your thoughts below. Tell us where you're watching from. We want to hear your voice, because voices like yours keep stories like this alive. The marble lobby of Blackwell Bank gleamed like a stage set for money. Crystal chandeliers threw gold across the polished floor, and every footstep echoed with authority. The customers who waited in line, wrapped in wool coats, tapping leather shoes, carried themselves with the quiet arrogance of people who believed they belonged here. And then, a little girl stepped forward. Her name was Lily Parker. 6 years old, thin as a branch, with a faded blue dress that had been washed to softness. In one arm, she held a cloth doll with a missing button eye. In her other hand was an envelope, worn from folding and unfolding. She had ridden 2 buses across the city that morning, clutching that envelope so tightly that the paper had creased into her skin. She pressed her toes into the floor and reached up until her chin barely cleared the counter. "Excuse me," she said, her voice small but steady. "I need to check an account." The teller blinked. He was young, his tie too tight, his hair carefully parted. He forced a smile that quickly broke into a chuckle. "Sweetheart, do you even know what this is? Bank accounts aren't for kids. It's my mom's." Lily answered quickly. She slid the envelope forward with both hands. "She wrote this. She said if something happened, I should come here." The teller raised his eyebrows, humoring her. He opened the envelope and pulled out a paper covered in shaky handwriting. It had an account number written in ink that bled through the thin page. Beneath it, a note. "Ask for help. Don't give up." "Where's your mom now?" the teller asked, already dreading the answer. Lily swallowed hard, her fingers clutching the doll until the seams stretched. "She can't come. She's gone." The teller looked down, uncomfortable. A murmur ran through the line behind her shifting coats. Impatient sighs. Whispers, carrying like smoke. "Sweetheart," the teller said again, this time softer. "I'm sorry, but you need an adult with you. It's the rule." "I am an adult," Lily whispered. Her chin lifted, small and proud. "In my house." That sentence made a few heads turn. A man in a blazer scoffed. "This is absurd." Another woman muttered. "She probably found it in the trash." The teller hesitated, glancing at the note again. Something about the account number tugged at him. He typed it into his computer. The system beeped, screen flickering. His face shifted, first confusion, then unease. He typed again. Numbers appeared. Large numbers. He leaned closer to the monitor, as if distance might change what he was seeing. His lips parted slightly. "Oh God," he whispered. The lobby leaned in with him. "What is it?" a customer asked. The teller didn't answer. He reached for the printer. A slip of paper slid out, filled with numbers so large they looked like mistakes. His hands shook as he held it. The glass door swung open. Cold November air swept in, and with it came a man whose presence turned heads instantly. Victor Marlowe, the branch manager. He walked toward the counter with practiced confidence, cufflinks flashing under the chandeliers. His smile was polished, but his eyes were calculating. "What's going on here?" The teller froze, slip in hand. "Sir, this child is..." She brought in an account. Victor extended his hand without looking at Lily. The teller reluctantly passed the slip to him. Victor's eyes scanned the numbers. His smile vanished. His jaw tightened. Then he folded the slip carefully, pressing the crease flat with his thumb, and slid it into his pocket. He looked at Lily for the first time. His voice was smooth, but it carried a blade. "Miss, we can't disclose this information without a guardian. That's policy." Lily gripped her doll tighter. But it's real? Victor's lips curled into something resembling a smile. That's not for you to know. A ripple of whispers cut through the lobby. People were already drawing their conclusions. She's lying. The kid's confused. What's the manager hiding? The pressure in Lily's chest grew heavier. She tugged on her mother's scarf tied around her neck, the only piece of warmth she owned. My mom said you'd help me. She said not to look away. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Annoyance. Maybe even guilt, but it vanished quickly. He straightened, addressing the room instead of the child. Ladies and gentlemen, we all respect rules, don't we? Without rules, there's chaos. The lobby nodded uneasily, not at him, but at the idea of order. Lily pressed her doll to the counter, propping it up as if it could speak for her. I'm not leaving, she whispered. Her voice cracked, but carried. The teller shifted uncomfortably. He looked at her, then at Victor. His hands trembled near the keyboard. He knew the truth. The account was real. The money was there. Victor's gaze sliced across him like a warning. Don't, he said softly, too low for most to hear. The teller's mouth closed. His shoulders sagged. Lily blinked hard, willing back the tears. Her mother's words rang again. Dignity doesn't cost a dime. You pay for it. With your back straight. And your voice steady. She lifted her chin. You're treating me like a thief. I'm not. I'm just Lily Parker. My mom said you'd remember being small. The room stilled. For a moment, even Victor seemed unsure how to respond. Then he leaned down, his smile sharp. Go home, little girl. Fairy tales don't pay rent. A laugh snorted from someone in line. Others looked away, ashamed, but unwilling to speak. Lily's cheeks burned. She held her doll close. I won't leave, she said again. Victor's smile faded. He signaled toward the security guard. Escort her out. The guard hesitated, his large hands uncertain. He looked at Lily, then at the watching crowd, then back to Victor. Sir, she's just a child. Do it, Victor snapped. The guard stepped forward, and Lily's heart thudded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She backed up against the counter, her doll squeezed to her chest. At that moment, the main doors swung open again. This time, the lobby fell silent, not out of curiosity, but recognition. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered. His gray overcoat carried the weight of authority. His presence filled the room before he even spoke. Ethan Blackwell, billionaire investor. The man whose name crowned the bank's sign outside. Whispers raced through the crowd. Customers straightened. Even Victor stiffened. Ethan walked forward, each step measured, his eyes scanning the scene. They landed on Lily, small, trembling, clutching her doll like a lifeline. He paused. Something in her eyes stopped him cold. He turned to Victor. His voice cut the air like a blade. What's happening here? Victor opened his mouth, but no words came. His tongue tripped over excuses. Sir, this child, she's trespassing. She's a child. Ethan interrupted. His tone was sharp enough to make the chandeliers tremble. He stepped beside Lily, his towering frame shielding her. And in my bank, children are treated with respect. The crowd froze. Lily pressed into his coat, breathing in the scent of rain and wool. She didn't know who he was, but she knew she wasn't alone anymore. Victor's face drained of color. He stammered, Sir, it's a misunderstanding. Ethan's eyes narrowed. No, it's arrogance, cruelty. And it ends now. The room exhaled, as if the spell of silence had broken. Whispers returned, but they were different now. Shameful, self-aware. The teller looked at Lily and finally spoke. The account. It's real. The balance is... Enough, Victor barked, his voice cracking. But the damage was done. Everyone had heard. Lily tightened her grip on her doll, For the first time that day, she allowed herself a small breath of hope. Ethan placed a firm hand on Lily's shoulder. His voice dropped low, but the whole lobby heard. "You're safe now." But as he said it, cameras flashed outside the glass doors. Reporters were already gathering, microphones raised, questions ready. The story inside the bank had spilled into the streets, and soon it would flood the city. And in a corner of the lobby, Victor Marlowe clenched his fists, his jaw tight. He wasn't finished, not yet. What would happen when the truth left these walls? The lobby of Blackwell Bank was still humming with whispers when Ethan Blackwell placed his hand on Lily Parker's shoulder. His voice had been steady, sharp, and final. "You're safe now." But safe was never permanent. Not in a place like this. Outside, the glass doors had turned into a wall of cameras. Reporters pressed forward, microphones jutting like bayonets, their voices colliding in a storm of questions. "Mr. Blackwell, who is the child? Why is she here? What happened inside?" The world outside was hungry, and the scent of scandal had already reached it. Victor Marlowe, still standing stiffly behind the counter, wiped his forehead with a silk handkerchief. His polished confidence from minutes earlier had cracked, but his instincts were fast. He knew this moment could either destroy him or give him a chance to twist the story before it left the building. He stepped forward, his voice smooth as butter, loud enough for the room to hear. "Mr. Blackwell, I assure you, this is nothing more than a misunderstanding." The child wandered in with a piece of paper, claiming it tied her to one of our accounts. "Naturally, we followed protocol. That's all." Ethan turned his head slowly, his gaze colder than glass. "Protocol," he repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. "Protocol didn't stop you from humiliating her in front of a crowd. Protocol didn't stop you from calling her a thief." The lobby had gone quiet again. Customers stood frozen, watching this exchange unfold like theater. Some looked ashamed, others fascinated, but all of them knew they were witnessing something they would not forget. Victor adjusted his tie, his eyes darting to the cameras still flashing outside. "With respect, sir, we cannot give access to accounts without guardianship verification. The child has no legal authority. It would be irresponsible." Ethan's jaw tightened. His hand on Lily's shoulder steadied her, though her knees still shook beneath her faded dress. "And yet," he said, "the account is real. Isn't it?" Victor's lips pressed into a line. The teller, still pale, swallowed hard. His voice cracked but pushed forward. "Yes, sir, it's real." A gasp moved through the crowd. The sound was sharp, like a match being struck in a dark room. Victor glared at the teller, but it was too late. The truth had been spoken aloud, and no velvet word could cover it now. Lily looked up at Ethan, her small voice trembling. "That means my mom was right?" Ethan's features softened for a moment. He crouched slightly, lowering himself to her height. "Yes, Lily, your mother was right." His voice carried, though it was gentle. "And no one can take that truth away from you." "One." Her eyes shimmered, and she hugged her doll tighter. For the first time since stepping into the bank, she felt her heart steady, if only a little. But Victor wasn't finished. He straightened, gathering his authority like a cloak. "Mr. Blackwell, with respect, this is highly irregular. If this child truly is connected to such an account, then we must investigate the origins. Fraud, inheritance, disputes, identity verification. These matters are complicated. A public display only invites chaos." His words were crafted not for Ethan, but for the crowd. He wanted to seed doubt, to make the people watching question what they'd seen. Ethan saw through it. "Chaos doesn't come from truth, Victor. It comes from people like you, hiding it." The room seemed to lean closer, every soul hooked on the confrontation. "Sir," Victor said, his voice cool now, "may I remind you, as branch manager, I am entrusted with safeguarding the integrity of this bank. Allowing a child to claim access without proper verification could tarnish our reputation. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Our reputation was just tarnished. By you. The words hit harder than any shout. Victor stiffened. His pride burned beneath his skin, but he forced his lips into another smile. Very well. If this is how you wish to proceed. He stepped back, raising his hands as if surrendering to the inevitable. But inside, his mind was already racing. The world outside would feast on this. The only question was whether he could spin the narrative before it swallowed him whole. Ethan looked down at Lily again. We're leaving, he said gently. But as they turned toward the doors, the crowd inside shifted like a tide. People whispered. Phones were lifted to record, and in the glass reflection, Ethan saw the flashing lights of the press already waiting. He hesitated. Stepping into that chaos meant exposing Lily's face, her story, her pain. He had the power to shield her, but also the responsibility to stand beside her. Mr. Blackwell, a reporter shouted through the doors. Why is a billionaire protecting a child from the streets? The question cut through even the thick glass. Lily's hand tightened around his. She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. Do we have to go out there? Ethan exhaled slowly. Yes, Lily. Because the truth belongs out there. Ugh. The doors swung open, and the lobby was flooded with the roar of voices, the strobe of cameras, the desperate hunger of a city smelling blood. Reporters surged forward, shouting over each other. Who is she? Is this your daughter? What happened inside the bank? Was there fraud? Ethan raised a hand, his deep voice cutting through the noise like thunder. Enough. The crowd stilled, if only for a heartbeat. This child is Lily Parker, he said. She came here today with nothing but courage and her mother's last instructions. And this institution, my institution, mocked her for it. His gaze swept across the sea of cameras, his tone unwavering. That ends now. Gasps, murmurs, furious scribbles on notepads. The story was alive now, and it would run wild. Behind them, Victor Marlowe stood in the lobby's shadows, his fists clenched tight. He knew what this meant. Ethan had turned the moment into a reckoning, and if Victor didn't act quickly, his career and maybe more would be over. The reporters pressed closer, questions tumbling like stones. Mr. Blackwell, what will you do for her? What happens next? Ethan glanced down at Lily, her small hand still clutching his, her scarf pulled tight against the November wind. He looked back at the cameras. I'll tell you what happens next, he said. This bank will make amends, not just to Lily, but to every child like her. Today, we begin something new. The crowd erupted, voices colliding in disbelief and awe. Lily, overwhelmed, pressed closer against him. She had wanted only to know if her mother's words were true. Now, the whole city seemed to be staring at her, waiting. Ethan guided her toward the waiting cars at the curb. The reporters chased them, their voices rising higher. But as the door shut behind them, blocking out the chaos, Ethan's face darkened, because he knew this wasn't over. Inside the bank, Victor Marlowe dialed a number on his private phone, his voice low and venomous. We have a problem. And her name is Lily Parker. Ethan had promised the world that this was the beginning of something new. But in the shadows, Victor had already planted the seeds of war. And soon, Lily's story wouldn't just belong to her. It would belong to everyone watching, waiting, and ready to tear it apart. Who would control that story? Ethan, or the man determined to destroy them both? The black sedan rolled through the streets of Manhattan like a moving fortress, its tinted windows shutting out the chaos still raging in front of Blackwell Bank. Inside, the silence pressed close. Lily sat stiffly on the leather seat, her doll clutched tight, her knees knocking together, though she wasn't cold anymore. Across from her sat Ethan Blackwell. He had shed his overcoat, the crisp lines of his suit untouched by the storm he had just faced outside. Yet his eyes were not the eyes of a man untouched. They studied Lily with a strange mixture Anger, guilt, and something softer that he couldn't quite name. "You were brave in there," Ethan said, finally. His voice lower now, stripped of the thunder he had used in front of the cameras. "Braver than most men I know." Lily looked at him, her lips parting but no words coming. She only tightened her grip on her doll and nodded. Ethan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Tell me, Lily, how did you end up with that account number?" Her gaze dropped to her hands. "It was my mom's. She wrote it down. She said if she couldn't take care of me anymore, I should go to the bank. She said there would be help." Ethan sat back, his jaw tightening. The note. The slip of paper Victor had tried to bury in his pocket. He had caught only a glimpse of the figures on the teller's face, but that glimpse had told him enough. This was not a mistake. Someone had intended for Lily Parker to have something valuable enough to shake the marble walls of his bank. "And your father?" Ethan asked carefully. "He left when I was a baby," Lily said, almost matter of fact, though her voice trembled at the edges. "It's just been me and Mom. Until—" She swallowed. Her tiny shoulders rose and fell. "Until last week." The words landed like stones in Ethan's chest. He turned his gaze to the window, the blur of city lights streaking past. For a man whose empire was built on numbers, leverage, and balance sheets, there was something in Lily's raw honesty that unsettled him more than any hostile takeover ever could. The sedan slowed as it approached Blackwell Tower, his corporate headquarters. Dozens of stories of glass and steel loomed above, lit like a beacon against the November night. Ethan straightened his tie, then looked at Lily again. "Come with me," he said. Her eyes widened. "Inside? There?" "Yes. If Victor Marlowe wants to play games, we'll play them where the whole world can see the scoreboard." The car stopped. Security rushed to open the door. Flashbulbs flared again, reporters having tracked them across the city. Ethan stepped out first, his height and authority cutting through the chaos. Then he extended a hand back into the car. Lily hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her small hand in his. The cameras went wild as the billionaire and the little girl walked side by side into the tower. Inside, the lobby of Blackwell Tower was no less intimidating than the bank, but it was quieter. A few executives stood frozen at the sight of Ethan with Lily at his side. They whispered, phones already buzzing in their hands. Margaret Collins, Ethan's chief advisor, hurried forward. Her expression was sharp, protective. "Ethan, what is this?" she whispered. "The press is on fire. Social media's exploding. Every outlet wants to know who she is." "She's Lily Parker," Ethan said simply. "And she was humiliated in my bank today." Margaret looked at Lily, then back at Ethan, her eyes narrowing with the calculation of someone who knew how quickly stories could turn. "Victor's already on the phone, I'm sure. He'll try to frame this as a mistake. Or worse, fraud." "Then let him try," Ethan said, his voice steely, "because the truth is about to be laid bare." They moved quickly to the elevator. The ride to the top floor felt endless. Lily's reflection in the mirrored walls looked so small beside Ethan's towering figure. Yet her chin was lifted now. The weight of fear hadn't left her, but something else had settled in its place, resolve. When the doors opened, the conference room was already lit. Executives sat around the massive glass table, tension hanging thick in the air. And at the head of the table, as if he had every right to be there, stood Victor Marlowe. He turned as they entered, his smile tight and false. "Mr. Blackwell." What a surprise. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be here, Victor." Victor spread his hands. "I came to protect the bank's interests. I hear rumors flying, half-truths spilling into the press. I thought you'd want clarity." His eyes flicked briefly to Lily, disdain flashing across them. "Instead, I see you parading a child into the tower, as if she's the face of our brand." Lily stepped back slightly, but Ethan's hand was firm at her shoulder. "Careful, Victor," he said, his voice sharp enough to slice glass. Victor shrugged, feigning calm. Look, Ethan. Whatever sob story this child has spun, we both know accounts like the one she's waving around aren't handed out to children of nobodies. There must be fraud, or at the very least, a tragic misunderstanding. Margaret stepped forward, a file in her hand. We already pulled the account, she said crisply. It's real, active, and heavily funded. The records show it was established years ago under the name Elaine Parker. Lily's breath caught. That's my mom. Victor's smile faltered, but only for a moment. Convenient, he said. And yet, if such sums exist, one must ask, who funded it? And why? Ethan's eyes bored into him. That's exactly what we're going to find out. And we'll do it with full transparency. The executives shifted uneasily, their loyalties tugging between the billionaire who signed their checks and the manager who managed their daily power. Victor leaned back, folding his arms. Be careful, Ethan. You open those books, and you might not like what you find. Not about her. Not about this bank. The threat hung heavy in the air. Ethan stepped closer, his shadow falling across Victor. Then let's open them wider. The silence in the room was suffocating. Lily stood on her tiptoes, peering over the edge of the table. Her doll still tucked against her. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood one thing. These people were deciding her fate, and for the first time in her life, someone powerful was standing on her side. The meeting adjourned in tense silence. Ethan guided Lily toward the hallway, his mind already racing with the storm to come. But as they stepped out, Margaret pulled him aside. Her face was pale. Ethan, she whispered. You need to know something. That account, Elaine Parker didn't open it alone. It was funded by someone inside this bank. Ethan froze, the weight of her words settling like lead. Who? He demanded. Margaret's eyes darted to the conference room door where Victor still lingered, smiling faintly as if he had already won. You're not going to like the answer, she said. The elevator ride down from the conference room felt heavier than the climb up. The mirrored walls reflected Lily's pale face, her small hand still clutching Ethan's, her doll pressed against her chest as if it could protect her from the world that had suddenly grown so loud. Ethan stood tall beside her, his jaw clenched tight, his eyes fixed straight ahead. He was no longer just a man escorting a child out of an uncomfortable scene. He was a storm, barely contained within a suit. When the doors opened into the lobby of Blackwell Tower, the world was waiting. Reporters had spilled inside, despite security's protests. Cameras rose like weapons. Voices collided in a cacophony of questions. Mr. Blackwell, what's the truth about the Parker account? Why is this girl with you? Are you hiding something? Lily flinched at the noise, pressing closer to Ethan's side. He tightened his grip on her hand, shielding her with his body. Margaret Collins, walking just behind them, hissed under her breath. We can't keep them out. The story's bigger than us now. Victor Marlowe appeared at the far end of the lobby, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his smile fixed in place like a politician's mask. He stepped forward slowly, every movement measured. The cameras turned toward him as if on cue. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor began, his voice smooth, projecting across the marble hall. What you've seen today is nothing more than a tragic misunderstanding. A child, grieving the loss of her mother, clings to a scrap of paper and an impossible hope. We sympathize deeply, but let us be clear. Blackwell Bank cannot be manipulated by sentiment. We deal in facts, in law, in order. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded. Others frowned. Lily's lips parted, her breath catching. Ethan stepped forward. His voice cut through the lobby like thunder. Facts? Then let's speak them plainly. The account exists. It was opened under Elaine Parker's name. And this child, her daughter, was humiliated in front of witnesses for daring to ask the truth. The reporters surged closer, their pens and cameras trembling with the scent of drama. "Is it true?" one shouted. "Does the account really hold millions?" Victor's smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed slightly. "What's true is that accounts of this magnitude are not left in the care of children. Fraud is common. Mistakes happen. Until we investigate fully, nothing is certain." Lily's small voice carried through the noise, trembling but strong. "My mom told me it was real. She said not to give up." For a moment, the lobby hushed. The child's words, so unpolished and raw, landed heavier than any lawyer's argument. Ethan crouched beside her, lowering himself so the cameras could capture his face level with hers. "And she was right, Lily," he said, softly, but clearly enough for the microphones to pick up. "You didn't give up, and you never will." The crowd stirred. A few gasps, a few cheers. Victor's jaw twitched. He could feel the narrative slipping away from him, the sympathy turning toward Lily, toward Ethan. His smile cracked. Just barely. "This is reckless," he said sharply. "You're turning a child into a spectacle for your own benefit, Ethan. Protecting her? Or parading her for your own reputation?" Ethan rose slowly, his height towering, his voice like ice. "I don't need parades, Victor. And I don't need reputation. But I will not stand by while arrogance tramples dignity." The tension snapped like a live wire. The reporters shouted again, cameras flashing. The story had outgrown the bank, outgrown the tower it was spilling into the bloodstream of the city itself. Margaret pushed forward, a file clutched tightly in her hand. "Enough of speculation," she announced. "We pulled the preliminary record. The account is not only real, it was funded consistently over the last decade. Deposits, large ones, routed through shell holdings, tied back to this bank." The lobby gasped. Reporters scrambled. The words "shell holdings" hit like dynamite. Victor's face went white, then red. He turned on Margaret, fury breaking through the cracks of his composure. "You had no authority." "I had every authority," she snapped back, her voice like steel. "Because Ethan Blackwell asked me to find the truth. And I serve the truth, not your ambition." Victor's fists clenched, his voice dropped low, dangerous. "Do you know what you've done? You've exposed this institution to chaos. Do you think the press will stop at a sympathetic child? They'll dig, they'll devour, and they'll burn us all." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but carrying. "Sometimes things need to burn before they can be rebuilt." The words echoed in the marble hall. Lily pressed against Ethan's side, her doll limp in her arms. She didn't understand all of it, the shell accounts, the politics, the weight of millions. But she understood one thing. Ethan believed her. And that belief was a light she hadn't known she needed until now. Victor, realizing the tide was turning, tried one last play. He turned to the cameras, spreading his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen, think carefully. Do you trust a grieving child and a billionaire desperate to protect his empire? Or do you trust the laws, the rules, the structure that keeps banks safe for everyone?" Ethan didn't let the question hang. He faced the cameras head on, his voice steady, his hand resting firmly on Lily's shoulder. "I don't ask you to trust me. I ask you to trust her. Trust the courage it took for a 6-year-old girl to walk into a marble bank alone with nothing but her mother's words. That is dignity. That is truth." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others shouting questions, the chaos boiling over. Victor's face was stone now, his eyes like shards of glass. He turned and stalked toward the back offices, his phone already in his hand. Ethan guided Lily toward the exit, Margaret close behind. The reporters followed, flooding them with light and noise. As the revolving doors opened, The cold Manhattan wind rushed in, carrying the smell of smoke from somewhere distant, the metallic tang of winter. Lily shivered, but Ethan's coat wrapped around her shoulders, heavy and protective. They stepped into the night, the crowd pressing closer. Ethan raised his hand again, trying to shield Lily from the blaze of cameras. But across the street, half hidden in the shadows, another figure watched. A man in a dark suit, his face obscured, his stance predatory. A phone glowed faintly in his hand as he whispered into it. "Yes," the man said quietly, "the girl is real. And Blackwell has made her his symbol. It's time we deal with this. Our way." The sedan door shut, cocooning Ethan and Lily once more. She leaned against him, exhaustion pulling at her eyelids. "Am I really safe now?" she whispered. Ethan looked out the window, his reflection fractured against the city lights. Somewhere behind those lights, Victor was plotting. And now, so was someone else. "You're safe with me," he said. But the weight in his voice betrayed what he knew. Safety was fragile, and the storm had only just begun. The storm broke before dawn. By 6 in the morning, Lily Parker's face was on every television screen in New York. By 8, it was on the morning news across the country. A grainy clip from someone's cell phone, Lily standing in the marble lobby of Blackwell Bank, her doll clutched tight, her voice trembling but stubborn. "I'm not leaving." The clip ran again and again, framed with headlines like, "Bank humiliates orphan child. Billionaire defends little girl against own manager." The story of Lily Parker. On talk shows, hosts wiped at their eyes. On social media, hashtags bloomed. Number stand with Lily. Number respect over wealth. Number Blackwell Bank. The public, always starved for symbols, had found one. But symbols cut both ways. At Blackwell Tower, the press swarmed outside, cameras and microphones waiting for Ethan Blackwell to appear. The man who usually controlled the markets with a word was now at the center of a story he hadn't asked for, with a 6-year-old child at its core. Inside, Ethan watched the television monitors in his office, the volume muted. He saw Lily's frightened face in replay, her small chin raised, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. He pressed a hand to his jaw, the weight of responsibility pressing harder than any business deal he had ever signed. Margaret Collins stood near the window, phone in hand, her tone clipped as she fielded call after call. "No. We are not releasing a statement yet. No, Ethan Blackwell will not be doing an exclusive interview. Yes, the account is real. That is all we're saying for now." She hung up, turned, and exhaled. "They want blood," she said. "Some of them want Victor's. Some of them want yours. And all of them want Lily's." Ethan's eyes flicked toward the adjoining room, where Lily sat on the edge of a couch too large for her, watching cartoons with the volume low. Her doll rested in her lap, one button eye staring blankly. She seemed calm, but Ethan noticed the way her hand twisted the fabric of the doll's dress, over and over. "She's a child," Ethan said quietly. "Not a weapon, not a shield. A child." Margaret crossed her arms. "That's not how the world sees her. To them, she's a headline, a rallying cry, a litmus test for morality. They'll use her until she breaks or until you do." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then I'll change the story. I'll give them something else to rally around. Something bigger than gossip." Margaret's eyes narrowed. "What are you planning?" Before Ethan could answer, the door opened. An assistant leaned in, pale and nervous. "Sir, Victor Marlowe is on the morning shows. You should see this." Ethan turned back to the monitors. There was Victor, framed in the polished studio lights of a national broadcast. His smile was somber now, his voice gentle, dripping with false sympathy. "We at Blackwell Bank grieve with young Lily Parker, but we must also protect the integrity of our institution. We cannot allow emotions to overrule security." This account, if it is truly hers, must be investigated for her safety and for the safety of our clients. The anchor nodded gravely, feeding the narrative. So you believe this could be fraud? Victor sighed, performing sorrow like an actor. I fear she may have been manipulated by parties we do not yet understand. She is, after all, only a child. Vulnerable. Impressionable. Ethan's fists clenched on the desk. Victor leaned forward, lowering his voice. I only pray she isn't being exploited by those who seek publicity. That would be the true tragedy. The interview ended. The camera cut back to the anchor, but the damage was done. Margaret turned, fury in her voice. He's turning it back on us. He's painting you as the exploiter. Ethan's gaze stayed on the screen, his jaw set. Then it's time to show the world what we really stand for. By mid-morning, Ethan walked onto the steps of Blackwell Tower, with Lily at his side. The crowd erupted, cameras blinding, reporters shouting over each other. Lily flinched, pressing closer to Ethan. But he bent low and whispered, It's all right. Just hold on to me. He raised a hand, and the noise settled into a tense silence. His voice rang out clear. Yesterday, this child came into my bank with nothing but courage and her mother's words. She was mocked, humiliated, and nearly cast aside. That was wrong. Not just for her, but for every child who has been told their voice doesn't matter because they are small or poor or powerless. He paused, his hand resting on Lily's shoulder. So let me be clear. Lily Parker is not powerless, and neither is any child like her. The crowd erupted, cheers mixing with more questions. Ethan raised his voice above them. Today, I am founding the Lily Parker Foundation. It will be dedicated to supporting children who grow up without safety, without wealth, without hope. We will fund housing, education, and protection for those who need it most, and we will hold accountable anyone who mocks dignity in the name of profit. The cheers drowned the questions now. Chants began. Stand with Lily. Stand with Lily. Lily looked up at Ethan, her eyes wide, her face caught between confusion and awe. She whispered, All that, for me? Ethan bent low. His voice meant only for her. For you. And for every child who deserves better. Less. But even as the crowd roared, the storm darkened elsewhere. In a quiet office across the city, Victor Marlowe slammed his fist onto a desk. His assistant flinched. They've turned her into a saint, Victor snarled, and him into a savior. If this keeps spreading, I'm finished. His phone buzzed. He snatched it up. A low voice spoke on the other end. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. Then we adjust. The girl is the key. If she stands, you fall. If she breaks, so does he. Victor's throat tightened. And you can arrange that? The voice chuckled softly. We already are. The line went dead. Victor sat back in his chair, sweat prickling his temple. For the first time, he wondered if he had aligned himself with something darker than ambition. That evening, Ethan sat with Lily in the quiet of his penthouse, the city lights glowing through the windows. She curled on the couch beside him, her doll tucked under her chin. Will they always shout at us? She asked softly. Not always, Ethan said. Sometimes they'll listen. She nodded sleepily, her eyelids heavy. As long as you're here, I don't mind. Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't used to being anyone's anchor. His life had been built on walls, on distance, on solitude. And yet this small child had walked into his empire and turned it upside down. He brushed a strand of hair from her face as she drifted into sleep. Margaret entered quietly, her expression grim. We've intercepted chatter, she said in a low voice. Someone's moving against her, Ethan. This isn't just Victor. There's a network people with money, power, and reasons to see you fall. Ethan looked down at Lily, then back at Margaret. His voice was cold steel. Then let them come, because I will burn everything I have before I let them touch her. Far below the penthouse, on a dark Manhattan street, a man in a suit stood beneath a broken streetlight, phone pressed to his ear. His face was half hidden, his voice a whisper. "Tomorrow," he said. "We move tomorrow. The girl won't know what hit her." By Monday morning, the tide had begun to turn. The first wave of headlines had crowned Lily Parker a symbol of courage. Overnight, she had become the little girl with the doll, the face of innocence, standing against arrogance. But symbols are fragile things, and power knows how to twist them. On the television in Ethan's penthouse, the morning anchors spoke with hushed gravity. New allegations surface in the Blackwell Bank scandal. One said, her manicured hands folded tightly. Sources claim the so-called Lily account may have been funded by irregular transactions. Could this be part of a larger fraud scheme? The screen split into panels of experts, each more certain than the last. "Children are often manipulated in these situations," one said. "It's a clever ploy, emotionally effective but legally meaningless," another chimed. Ethan muted the sound. His jaw flexed as he stared at the crawling text at the bottom of the screen. Is billionaire using orphan to cover his tracks? Across the couch, Lily sat cross-legged, her doll balanced on her knees. She tilted her head, trying to read the scrolling words. "Are they talking about us?" Ethan turned, his expression softening. "About me," he corrected. "They're talking about me. Not you. But my name's on there," Lily whispered, tracing the letters with her finger. The truth was cruel. Her name was everywhere now. On lips, on screens, in whispers across the city. Ethan reached over and turned off the television. "You don't have to watch this," he said, but she already had. And the seed of doubt had been planted. At school that afternoon, the whispers were louder. Lily walked down the hallway with her scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. Her doll tucked deep in her backpack for safety. But nothing could shield her from the words. "Hey, it's the millionaire's fake daughter," one boy sneered. "My mom says her mom was a scammer," another girl added. Lily's cheeks burned. She wanted to shout, to explain, but the words stuck. She kept walking, her sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. The hallway felt longer than any bus ride, each step heavier than the last. When she reached her classroom, she slid into her seat and pulled her notebook close. She wrote her name over and over on the page, Lily Parker, Lily Parker, Lily Parker, as if the act of writing it could keep it from being stolen. Her teacher offered a gentle hand on her shoulder, but even kindness felt like pity now. That evening, Ethan returned from a meeting at the bank to find Lily curled in the corner of the living room, her knees tucked to her chest. The doll sat limp beside her. "They think I'm lying," she whispered. "Even the kids." Like end. Ethan sat down slowly, his weight heavy on the couch. He looked at her for a long time before answering. "The louder the truth is, Lily, the louder the lies get too. That's how the world works." Her eyes shimmered, her lip trembling. "But what if they're right? What if the money isn't really ours?" The question cut deeper than Ethan expected. He had spent decades mastering markets, swallowing rumors, wielding truths and half-truths like weapons. But a child asking if her dignity was real, that pierced him in a way no hostile takeover ever had. He took her hand gently. "Listen to me. Your mother left that account for you. She wanted you to be safe. That is the truth, and I will prove it." "How?" she asked, her voice barely more than a breath. "By opening everything," Ethan said firmly. "By showing the world there's nothing to hide. If Victor wants an investigation, he'll get one. But it won't bury us. It will bury him." Oh, at the same moment across town, Victor Marlowe poured himself a glass of scotch in his office. His television glowed with the same headlines Ethan had muted. But Victor smiled as he watched. "You see?" he said aloud, though no one else was in the room. "Doubt is poison, and it spreads fast." His phone buzzed. He picked it up. The calm, controlled voice of the suited man flowed through the speaker. "The smear is working, but don't celebrate yet. Blackwell is clever. He'll try to outmaneuver you." Victor swirled his glass. "Then, we tighten the noose. How far are you willing to go?" A low chuckle came from the other end. "As far as it takes. The girl is our leverage. If she falls, so does he." Victor hesitated, his hand trembling slightly. But ambition drowned hesitation. "Then let's make her fall." The following day, Ethan held a press conference in the same marble lobby where the storm had begun. The cameras crowded close, reporters hungry for every word. Lily stood behind him, half hidden, her doll peeking from her arms. Ethan's voice boomed across the hall. "There are lies spreading. Lies meant to break a child, to tarnish her mother's memory, to destroy dignity itself. So here is the truth. We are opening the account records. Every transaction, every document. Nothing will be hidden." Gasps rippled through the crowd. No billionaire volunteered transparency. It was unheard of. Victor stood at the edge of the room, his smile razor-thin. He leaned toward a nearby reporter and whispered just loud enough to be heard. "If he's opening the books, it's because he's desperate. The question is, what's he hiding?" The seed of doubt watered again. Ethan raised his hand for silence. "I told you yesterday this was bigger than Lily Parker. And I meant it. The Lily Parker Foundation is now funded with $50 million. Not just to protect her, but to protect every child who has ever been told they don't belong." The applause was deafening. But beneath it, the murmurs of suspicion still slithered. Lily clutched her doll, her small face caught between pride and fear. She wanted to believe him. She did. But the shadows outside seemed to grow longer every time the cameras flashed. That night, after the press had gone and the city lights had dimmed into a blur, Margaret found Ethan in his office, staring at the open files. "You know this won't be enough," she said quietly. "Transparency doesn't kill rumors. It feeds them." Ethan didn't look up. "Then we'll feed them until they choke." She hesitated. "And what about Lily? How long before she breaks under all this?" Ethan finally turned, his face drawn, his voice softer. "Then I'll hold her together, as long as it takes." Across the river, in a warehouse office lit by a single bulb, the suited man placed a folder on Victor's desk. Inside were photographs grainy, invasive of Lily on her way to school, clutching her doll. Victor's throat went dry. "You followed her?" The suited man's smile was thin, his voice a whisper. "Not just followed. We're ready to move whenever you say. If you want to break Blackwell, you start by breaking her." Victor closed the folder, his hands shaking. For the first time, he wasn't sure whether he was still in control or just another pawn. The November sky pressed low over Manhattan, thick with clouds that reflected the city's restless glow. By evening, the streets were slick from a light rain, each neon sign bleeding across the pavement like smeared paint. From the penthouse windows of Blackwell Tower, the world looked calm, almost untouchable. But down below, storm fronts were gathering not of weather, but of men. Inside, Ethan moved quietly through the apartment. Lily had finally fallen asleep, curled beneath a blanket on the couch, her doll tucked under her chin. The television flickered softly, muted cartoons casting color across her small face. For a moment, she looked like any child in the world, safe, untouched by scandal, untouched by men in suits who traded rumors like currency. Ethan lingered at the edge of the room, his hand resting on the back of a chair. He hadn't allowed himself this kind of pause in years. Power demanded motion, demanded deals and signatures, and decisions stacked like dominoes. But now his empire felt like scaffolding around a single fragile truth. This child trusted him. The knock came at 10:42 p.m. Sharp. Deliberate. Margaret appeared in the hall, her brow tight. Security wasn't expecting anyone. Margaret appeared. In the hall. Ethan moved to the door, signaling for silence. He opened it slowly, revealing Detective Harris, the NYPD officer who had quietly advised Ethan in recent days. His raincoat dripped onto the marble. "We intercepted chatter," Harris said without preamble. "Someone's moving against the girl. Could be tonight." Ethan's expression didn't change, but the air in the room grew heavier. "How close?" "Close enough I drove here instead of calling," Harris said. His eyes flicked toward the living room, where Lily slept. "You need to move her somewhere safe." Ethan shook his head. "They'll expect that. She stays here, where I can control the ground." Margaret frowned. "Control the ground? Ethan, this isn't a boardroom." "It's the same principle," Ethan said. "You anticipate the strike. You absorb it. And you break the attacker before he breaks you." Harris studied him for a long moment, then gave a curt nod. "Then I'm staying." At 11:27, the first shadow crossed the outer courtyard of the estate. The security cameras caught a glimpse. A tall man in a dark suit, moving with purpose. The feed blinked, then fuzzed. Static crawled across the monitors in the security office downstairs. The guards scrambled, radios crackling. "We've lost visual on the East Wing. Repeat. East Wing is dark." By 11:32, two more figures slipped past the perimeter. Their steps were careful, rehearsed. They moved like men who had done this before. Inside, Ethan stood at the window, watching rain bead against the glass. He didn't flinch when the lights flickered once, twice. He simply straightened his shoulders, turned, and walked toward the living room. Lily stirred as if sensing the shift. Her eyes blinked open, drowsy, then sharpened at the sight of Ethan's face. "What's wrong?" she whispered. "Nothing you need to fear," he said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "Stay here. Hold your doll. No matter what happens, don't let go." Her small hand tightened around the fabric. She nodded, though her lip trembled. Margaret hovered nearby, phone in hand, whispering into the receiver. "Yes. East Wing cameras are down. Reinforcements needed now." Detective Harris checked his weapon, the weight familiar in his palm. He glanced at Ethan. "You sure you want to stand in front of this storm?" Ethan's eyes were hard steel. "I've lived my life building walls of numbers and contracts. Tonight, I build a wall with myself." "Oh." At 11:45, the front doors of the penthouse rattled. Not knocked. Not tested. Rammed. The guards stationed there shouted, metal groaned, and then silence. A second later, the doors burst inward. Victor Marlowe stood framed in the entry, his face pale with desperation, his eyes wild. Behind him, the suited man and two others moved like shadows, their presence colder, sharper. Victor looked less like the polished manager of a bank and more like a man cornered by his own ruin. "Ethan," he shouted, voice cracking. "This ends tonight." Lily gasped, shrinking back on the couch. Her doll pressed tight against her chest. Ethan stepped forward, placing himself between her and the intruders. His voice was steady, low, commanding. "Victor, you've lost. Walk away before you destroy what's left of you." Victor's laugh was brittle, broken. "Lost? You think I've lost? I had everything until you turned this child into a weapon against me." "She's not a weapon," Ethan snapped. "She's a child." The suited man's voice slipped into the room, calm, almost silky. "Children are leverage, and leverage decides empires." His eyes flicked toward Lily. "Give her to us, Blackwell, and maybe this ends quietly." The air thickened. Margaret's breath caught. Harris raised his weapon, his stance tense. Ethan's answer was immediate. "Over my dead body." The suited man smiled faintly. That can be arranged. The room exploded. The intruders surged forward. Harris fired once, the gunshot deafening in the marble hall. One of the shadows fell, the other pressed against the wall, weapon flashing. Margaret dove behind the couch, dragging Lily with her. The child screamed, clinging to her doll as bullets tore splinters from the furniture. Ethan moved like a man possessed, grabbing the nearest chair and hurling it against the path of the attackers. His voice thundered, "Get her out, Margaret!" "No!" Lily cried, reaching toward him. Her small voice cut through the chaos. "Don't leave me." For an instant, Ethan froze. That cry pierced deeper than any bullet. He turned back, shielding her with his body. Victor stumbled forward, his own weapon shaking in his hand. Sweat streamed down his temple. "She ruined me!" he shouted. "That little girl ruined me." "Victor, don't," Ethan began, but Victor's finger trembled on the trigger. Lily sobbed, clutching her doll like a shield, and then Harris tackled Victor from the side, the gun firing into the ceiling. Marble dust rained down. The two men crashed to the ground, the weapon skittering across the floor. The suited man hissed, eyes flashing with something darker than anger. He grabbed Victor by the collar, yanking him upright. "Pathetic," he whispered in Victor's ear. "You can't even finish what you started." Then, without warning, he shoved Victor forward, straight toward Ethan. Victor stumbled, colliding with Ethan's chest. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, one filled with desperation, the other with cold fury. And then the suited man vanished into the shadows, slipping out the shattered doorway with his remaining accomplice. Silence fell, broken only by Lily's sobs. Victor collapsed to his knees, hands shaking, his face twisted with something between rage and regret. Harris stood over him, weapon trained, breath ragged. Margaret pulled Lily into her arms, rocking her, whispering, "It's over. It's over," though her own eyes said otherwise. Ethan stood still, chest heaving, his eyes fixed on the broken door. He knew what the others didn't yet grasp. It wasn't over. The suited man hadn't come to win tonight. He had come to test, to weaken, to plant fear, and he had succeeded. The police arrived minutes later, their sirens cutting through the night, their boots pounding across marble. Victor was dragged to his feet, his protests shrill. "It wasn't me. He made me do it. You don't understand, he's bigger than all of us." No one listened. Lily clung to Ethan's coat, her doll trapped between them. Her small voice trembled against his chest. "Are they gone?" Ethan looked down at her, forcing calm into his voice. "For now," but his eyes told a different story. Later, when the sirens faded and the officers had gone, Ethan stood alone at the shattered doorway. The city wind blew through, cold and relentless. He could still hear Lily's cry in his ears, sharper than any gunshot. "Don't leave me." Margaret stepped beside him, her voice low. "We stopped Victor. But the other one, who is he?" Ethan's gaze stayed on the dark skyline. "The real enemy. The one who doesn't show his name. The one who just declared war." He turned back into the apartment, where Lily slept restlessly on the couch, her doll clutched tight even in dreams. And Ethan whispered to himself, with a certainty that chilled the air, "They won't stop until they have her." The morning after the attack arrived pale and gray, the skyline of Manhattan still damp from the storm. For once, Blackwell Tower felt less like an empire, and more like a fortress, under siege. Security doubled at the entrances, guards posted at every corridor, cameras repaired and reinforced. Yet inside, despite the armor of glass and steel, fear lingered like smoke. Lily sat at the kitchen table, her small hands wrapped around a mug of cocoa, untouched. Her doll leaned against the cup, its stitched smile crooked, as if it too had survived the night's terror. Margaret fussed around her, setting out toast, fruit, anything to coax comfort. But Lily's eyes remained downcast. The innocence that had carried her through those first days now bore the cracks of something heavier. Ethan stood nearby, sleeves rolled, tie absent, his hair slightly unkempt, a rare sight for a man known for control. He studied the girl quietly, weighing not numbers or contracts, but something more fragile. Her trust. Trust he had promised never to let be broken again. Detective Harris entered, dropping a thick file on the counter. "We've traced the man in the suit," he said. "Real name. Still unclear. He uses half a dozen identities, but what matters is this. He's tied to groups that specialize in intimidation, extortion, and disappearances." Margaret stiffened. "Disappearances? You mean—" "Exactly what you think. I mean," Harris cut in. "He won't stop. Last night wasn't failure. It was rehearsal." The words coiled around the room like cold wind. Lily looked up finally, her voice small but steady. "He wanted me. Not you. Me." Ethan moved closer, kneeling so his eyes met hers. "He wanted to scare us. But you are not weak, Lily. Do you hear me? You're not just some number they can erase. You are more than they'll ever be." Her eyes brimmed, then she nodded, clutching the doll tight again. By noon, the decision was made. They couldn't hide behind reinforced doors. They had to face him, drag him into the light where shadows lost their power. Ethan called a press conference. Not from the estate this time, not hidden behind guarded gates, but at the steps of City Hall. "If he wants leverage," Ethan said grimly, "let him see what happens when we show the world who he really is." Margaret hesitated. "You're putting Lily in front of cameras again. Isn't that dangerous?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's only dangerous if we stay silent. He thrives on fear. Today, he learns what happens when a child's courage becomes a movement." The plaza outside City Hall was crowded by late afternoon. Protesters carried signs that read, "Respect over wealth," and "Stand with Lily." News vans lined the streets, cameras aimed at the podium. The air buzzed with anticipation, tension, hope. Ethan stepped up to the microphone, Lily at his side, Margaret steady just behind. Flashbulbs erupted, reporters shouting questions, but Ethan raised a hand. "Last night," he began, voice clear, "men tried to break into my home. They came not for money, not for secrets, but for a 6-year-old girl who dared to walk into a bank and demand respect." A ripple moved through the crowd. Lily pressed closer to him, her doll clutched like a banner. "She was mocked, laughed at, accused of theft," Ethan continued. "And when she stood tall, when she proved her worth, those who feared the truth tried to turn her into a weapon, a bargaining chip. But she is not a weapon. She is not leverage. She is a child, and she is my responsibility." Applause broke out, swelling, rolling across the crowd like thunder. Then, like a serpent from the crowd, a voice hissed, "Responsibility won't save her, Blackwell." Gasps erupted as the suited man stepped forward, slipping through the barricade as though the world parted for him. He wore no mask, no hesitation. His presence was cold, deliberate. Security moved, but he raised his hands, empty. "You think cameras make you safe?" he sneered. "You think this little girl is a symbol? Symbols can be broken." The crowd tensed. Harris moved swiftly, positioning himself between the man and the podium. Ethan didn't flinch. His voice carried, louder than the murmurs. "You've hidden long enough. You want me? Here I stand. But hear me. Well, you will not touch her." The suited man's smile was razor thin. "You already lost. The moment she stepped into your world, you gave me what I needed. Fear." And then, in a motion so fast it blurred, his hand darted to his coat. But Harris was faster. The crack of a gunshot split the air, echoing against marble walls. The suited man staggered, his eyes wide with shock. He collapsed to the pavement, clutching his side, rage burning even as his strength ebbed. The crowd surged back, Screams, mixing with camera shutters. Ethan shielded Lily, his body a wall. She buried her face in his chest, trembling but alive. Police swarmed. Harris pinned the man down, weapon steady. Blood seeped across the concrete. But the suited man's grin lingered, grotesque. "You think you've won?" he rasped. "But she'll never be free. She'll always carry this shadow." Ethan leaned close, his words ice. "She carries light, and no shadow has ever beaten light." The man spat blood, his smirk fading as officers dragged him away. The crowd erupted not in fear, but in cheers. Not at violence, but at defiance. At survival. That night, the world replayed the footage endlessly. The billionaire shielding the little girl, the shadowed figure finally exposed, the cry of a child turning into the roar of a movement. At the estate, Lily sat curled on the couch, her cocoa finally sipped, her doll nestled in her lap. Ethan sat beside her, exhausted, but unbowed. "Is it over?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her, his chest tightening. "The danger? For now. But the lesson what you gave this world, that will never end." "Miss." She tilted her head. "What lesson?" "That respect," he said softly, brushing her hair back, "isn't given by banks or by men in suits. It's carried inside us, and you carried it braver than anyone I've ever known." Her eyes softened. A smile, small but real, spread across her lips. She leaned against him. The doll squashed between them and closed her eyes. Outside, the city pulsed with headlines, hashtags, conversations. But in that quiet room, the battle ended not with fanfare, but with the steady breath of a child safe in her protector's arms. In the weeks that followed, changes rippled outward. Blackwell Bank overhauled its culture. Training programs rewritten from the ground up. Victor Marlowe disappeared from the news, his downfall sealed. And the suited man's arrest exposed networks darker than anyone guessed, networks dismantled because one child had dared to speak. But for Ethan, the true victory was smaller, quieter. It was Lily laughing again in the garden, chasing fallen leaves, her doll tucked into the crook of her arm. It was her running back to him, her voice clear, strong. "Daddy, look, I'm not scared anymore." He lifted her high, sunlight catching her smile. And in that moment, he knew the truth. The world had tried to break her. Instead, she had become its reminder that dignity is wealth, and light is stronger than any shadow. This story is not just about a little girl and a billionaire. It is about the universal struggle for dignity, justice, and the courage to be heard when the world doubts you. At its heart, it reminds us that wealth is not measured in bank accounts or skyscrapers, but in how we choose to protect and uplift the vulnerable. Ethan's fierce defense of Lily reflects a truth often forgotten in a society driven by appearances and status, that every human being, no matter how small, poor, or overlooked, carries an inherent worth that must be honored. For audiences, especially adults, navigating a complex world of power and prejudice, the message resonates deeply. It challenges us to ask ourselves, how often have we judged too quickly, spoken without compassion, or dismissed a voice because it seemed insignificant? Lily's courage in standing her ground, and Ethan's decision to risk everything for her dignity, reveal that true strength lies not in dominance, but in empathy and responsibility. The story also exposes the dangers of arrogance, showing how pride and cruelty can consume a man like Victor, while resilience and love can rebuild broken trust. Ultimately, it inspires reflection. In our families, workplaces, and communities, we are given chances each day to either mock or protect, to wound or to heal. The choice defines not only who we are, but the kind of world we leave behind.